Our story begins with Bill Buckner and with an error so famous I don't need to show you it. Go on, give it a mental replay. Bill doesn't mind. He's relieved I'm not showing you it for real. And he's not in Boston anymore. It's 1987. The Red Sox cut him. Right fielder Dwight Evans moved to first base for the rest of the season. And in a bit of foreshadowing, the worst position player from 1980 to 1990, Ed Romero, played 8 games at first in 87. And if we move beyond foreshadowing to five-shadowing, we come to the thesis, right where the teacher wants it. Of all the Red Sox before 2004 who inherited the curse of the Bambino, no one was cursed harder than Buckner's successors. These guys got the Babe's curse in chronic form. The first permanent solution at first base Boston brought in after Buckner was Todd Benziger in 1988. A year before, he was a 24-year-old rookie who demolished AAA pitching and came up fifth on the outfield depth chart but behind two rookie sensations, Mike Greenwell and Ellis Burks. Despite this, and his manager forgetting his name, Benziger hit well enough to get 223 at-bats in a stacked outfield, batting .278, slugging .444, a 1.2 wins above replacement in 73 games. In June '88, the Sox new manager Joe Morgan, the obscure '60s third baseman, not the Hall of Famer, made Benziger the starting first baseman, and he went on a hot streak. But starting slow and finishing slow gave him a pedestrian final stat line. I mean, a good team shouldn't be hitting their first baseman eighth. It's like driving your offense in eco mode. And they were swept in the ALCS by the A's, who had a proper first baseman that hit dingers. He upset Dwight Evans by pinch hitting for him in Game 4, and upset management by speaking a little too freely about the team's offensive struggles. I just read on 80's Twitter they might trade Benziger to Cleveland, and you just saw on 80's TikTok they might trade him to Houston. But no, he's going to the Reds for first baseman Nicky Saski, just as the newspaper predicted. And while I'm ostensibly focused on the Red Sox, Benziger is best known for his time in Cincinnati. He played all games but one in '89, leading the league in at-bats, in the fourth worst offensive season ever to lead the league in at-bats. In fact, no first baseman in baseball history has had more at-bats in a season with a lower OPS. He even called the guy he was traded for hitting advice. Is it starting to seem like this guy's not that good? But hey, he got to be in a famous play. He must be good. But wait, he just had an even worse year in 1990. The Reds' worst hitting regular is at first. Is that normal? Nah, don't be so critical. Look, it's another famous play, catching the last out of the World Series. He's just a little streaky. He's still good. Well, people said that for long enough that from his move to first in '88 through the end of his career, he was the third worst player in baseball. Player, not first baseman. And of everyone to play 500 games at first base in MLB history, Benziger has the lowest career WAR. So, the Red Sox took a promising rookie with 1.2 WAR in 73 games as an outfielder, moved him to first, and he became the worst long-term first baseman of all time, with negative 3.9 wins above replacement after his rookie season, all the while looking a bit like Bad Luck Brian. A princess of power locked in a tower, forced by a manager who didn't like him to platoon with himself. Pete Rose kept Nicky Saski in a first base timeshare as he gobbled up his own at-bats en route to tie Cobb's all-time hit record, hitting way below league average after turning 40. I'd give Pete Rose credit for valuing his historical reputation more than the outcome of Reds games, but yeah. Whatever Rose valued, it sure wasn't free-swinging power hitters. He wanted his players to show anger or at least frustration after striking out, but Esaski didn't do this, and Rose said Esaski's potential would, quote, always remain unlocked, end quote. I think he meant locked, but this is coming from a guy who used Shakespeare as an insult.
They're talking about Nick Esaski moving over to the Red Sox, and you had one shot of him looking like he came off a cough drop box. That's the difference. In Cincinnati, he had to be clean-shaven. But here in Boston, or with Boston, he goes to the beard.
After the Sox freed him from his big red tower, Esaski said, quote, "This is the first time I've enjoyed playing ball in a long time," end quote. He led the 1989 Sox in RBIs, home runs, and slugging. It was one of those cases of a streaky platoon guy finally given a full-time starting job with no competition on the second team of their career and breaking out as a star. I'm reminded of 2019 Jorge Soler and 2017 Justin Smoak. This was a platform season for Esaski going into free agency, and he signed a 3-year deal with his hometown Braves. He was hyped as a new franchise cornerstone, not like that overweight Lonnie Smith, but Smith went on to hit 300 and put up 4.6 wins above replacement in 1990 while Esaski couldn't get going, hitting just 171 in April with no RBIs and no extra base hits before going on the disabled list with what was reported as a sprained shoulder. When team doctors looked at Esaski, they found him struggling with unsteadiness. Normally a sure fielder, he'd made 5 errors in 9 games, including on the play he hurt his shoulder. He was fatigued and nauseous, his vision was blurred, and his headaches were getting worse each day. Quote, "At times I'd catch the ball," Esaski said, "but didn't know how it got in my glove. It was like I was playing a foreign game," end quote. He went on a tour of doctors and a trip to the Mayo Clinic, and after more than 30 tests were run, including a spinal tap, the diagnosis was vertigo caused by a right inner ear no longer assisting with his balance, along with possibly Lyme disease. But the prognosis was hazy, and no one was sure how to treat his symptoms. In Esaski's first rehab assignment, he managed to hit just 6 fair balls in 50 total swings and was unable to catch even a pickoff throw. He received IVs for an hour and a half per day for a month. He bought glasses with a 2010 prescription. He tried home remedies mailed to him by fans. Someone told him to put yogurt in his ear. He tried hypnosis. He removed his braces in case they were the issue. He tried a rehab program, which included video games and quote-unquote silly walks. But there was just no getting around the fact that baseball was a game of microseconds, and no one, not even a muscle-bound 31-year-old, could play that game with vertigo.
I finally heard a description of Nick Esaski's condition. It's been a very difficult condition to describe to the public because it's a very unusual situation, that vertigo that he's suffering from. But I finally heard a description that can give maybe the general public an idea of what Nick is going through. First, the pitch fouled away. The description is this. Let's say Nick Esaski is looking at a television picture like you at home are right now. Now turn your head to the left and look at the wall. And just imagine that image of the television screen staying in your view for maybe a second before it goes away. Every time he turns his head in one direction, what he was last looking at remains in his vision for about a second before he's able to focus in on what he looks at next. That is what is causing all the problems with Nick Esaski.
Now you can see how that would be hard in any life, but in the life of a professional athlete where somebody's throwing about 90 miles an hour at you and you're moving around.
And as much in fielding as in hitting.
The only way back onto the field appeared to be the symptoms magically disappearing, and to contextualize this, Sports Illustrated in 1991 named 3 former vertigo sufferers this happened to: the guy who led Nick's old team to a world championship after he left, the guy who scored on Buckner's error, and the guy who replaced Buckner at first temporarily enough to escape the wrath of the baseball gods who were laying on the irony thicker than usual. Mariners beat writer Larry LaRue named Esaski the starter on his anti-All-Star team with the quote-unquote best injury of the year. Closer to our time, Forbes would rank him first in a list of worst free agent signings, ahead of Bobby Bonilla. The Braves were left scrambling for replacements at first base, trying a few no-names out before promoting rookie David Justice, who would go on to win Rookie of the Year. After suiting up for a bench ride in the Braves' surprise 1991 playoff run, Esaski requested release from the Braves the following year, working through a messy divorce and burned out from 2 years of difficult rehab, with exercises designed to literally build immunity to fatigue, led by a neurologist Esaski called a quote-unquote sadist. He didn't suit up for 1992 to see his replacement, Sid Bream, slide into glory in Game 7 of the NLCS. He didn't return to clean out his locker with its motley stash of home remedies he never ended up trying. And as of today, Esaski's mysterious vertigo unfortunately persists, and he's gone down as a one-hit wonder. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In my one-hit wonder video, my Mark Eichhorn one, I quoted a writer for Bill James's site named Roel Torres, and I got a lot of positive feedback for that quote, so now I'm going to quote him again at length. I've always been pretty fixated with the concept of closure. I like to trace the arc of narrative trajectory, the slow, perpetual march toward catharsis and conclusion. I guess that I'm a fan of traditional story structure. The way I see it, we want all our stories to make sense. We want them to have a beginning, middle, and end. I bring all this up because my most vivid memory of Nick Esaski's saga in the summer of 1990 was the troubling lack of closure. Everything about it felt empty and unfinished. This was life before the internet. I'd scan the sports section on a daily basis looking for signs of his progress, trying to find out when he was coming back to crush the ball like he did previously, trying to figure out when he was coming back from his vertigo. You get used to timetables, players rising up from the DL from ailments big and small. Day-to-day for a contusion, 2 weeks for an oblique, a year for Tommy John. John Lester came back from cancer to close out the World Series. That's how it works. The medical team identifies the source of physical discomfort, it gets fixed, and the player gets back in the field to try and win another World Series. But defying all my expectations, Nicky Saski couldn't get past that inner ear infection. It got the better of him. The formula fell to pieces. There was no third act. There have only been a few baseball seasons where an elite first baseman rides in on a white horse announcing, "I've come from far-off lands. I seek a franchise to revitalize by hitting 51 home runs in a season. And all I ask is for 2 years and $2.5 million. The big off-season story of 1990 was the Cecil Fielder sweepstakes, but the Sox weren't willing to pay $2.5 million for 2 straight seasons where Fielder was the MVP runner-up and led the majors in homers. Boston settled for a less auspicious but no less chunky option at first. Starting 8 of the first 10 games in 1990 was Billy Joe Robideau, the second worst first baseman in the past 60 years by WAR, behind only Todd Benzinger. Maybe if he took pills or drugs from someone other than his doctor, he could have been Mark McGwire, but alas, in 27 games, Billy Joe batted .182 with a single home run. By OPS+, it was the best offensive showing he had for any of the 3 teams he played for.
Here's a little something for you busters.
That's right. One of Buckner's cursed successors was the man himself, but very briefly. He was too old, he had the knees of a septuagenarian, and while most fans welcomed him back to Fenway, many wouldn't forgive him for another couple decades, so he called it a career in June 1990 after a minor league contract and a 22-game farewell tour. In a career spanning 4 different decades, Billy Buck played earlier than Mike Schmidt and later than, Nicky Saski. But sitting here all this time in AA was this prospect. You know, Jeff Bagwell, the best first baseman of the 90s. He was traded for rental reliever Larry Anderson, who pitched 15 games in the regular season and took a dump in the ALCS with the lowest win probability added among Red Sox pitchers. For the second time in 3 years, they were swept by the A's. And just a note here, this is before the ALDS, so they were 0-8 in playoff games from 88 through 90. Bagwell debuted next season, winning the Rookie of the Year with 4.8 wins above replacement for the Astros. You can compare that to Carlos Quintana, who had 4.9 wins above replacement from 90 through 91, the year Bagwell debuted. I mean, I wouldn't compare them, but you can go right ahead. Quintana was a good player, batting second in the lineup. He had 2 consecutive good seasons, which is 1 more than Saski ever had, and he was about to make it 3 when the baseball gods cued the sad music. Quintana's brothers were traveling to an event in Venezuela when another vehicle hit theirs, and the other driver, in a fit of road rage, shot both of the brothers and fled the scene. That's one version of the story. The New York Times reports that his brothers were shot at a party. Either way, Quintana drove to the scene and transferred his brothers into his own car to take them to the hospital, when his car was struck by another vehicle and crashed into a bridge. Carlos broke his left arm and his right big toe, while his wife broke both of her legs. He was the 3rd Buckner successor to get into a car accident, following Benzinger and Robideau, though this was the only one to threaten the player's career. Quintana's recovery was delayed by an infection in his pelvis requiring additional surgery. He missed all of 1992 and returned in 93, second on the depth chart. He couldn't get into a rhythm, having lost some feeling in his thumb on top of the psychological strain, had no PS below 600, and never played in the majors again. We have a car wreck ruining the promising career of a first baseman who blocked a future Hall of Fame first baseman they traded away a year before, after being the runner-up and pursuing Cecil Fielder a year before that, which was a year after they got a first baseman who could actually hit but suffered a career-ending medical mystery. And that's not to mention the 2 worst first basemen in the last 60 years getting significant playing time in between those guys. All of this in a 5-year span after Bill Buckner's error in the 1986 World Series. But a new face was on his way to breaking this particular curse. Mo Vaughn, a big fella described by Bill James as the slowest man in baseball, broke out in 1993 with a 100 RBI season, and 2 years later was the first Red Sox first baseman to make the All-Star team since Carl Yastrzemski, and the first since Jimmy Fox to win MVP. Yastrzemski wanted playing outfield, not first base, but he played first later. So I began this story with the Mets winning their most recent World Series, 1986, and I will end this saga with the Mets in the year the Red Sox reversed the curse, paying $17,166,667 to the great Mo Vaughn, whose last game in the majors was in 2003. So I started making this video a few days after totaling my car in an effort to stop feeling sorry for myself by learning about people better than me who had worse luck than me, which of course led to Buckner, but also beyond. So to Carlos Quintana, Todd Benziger, Billy Joe Robideau, and Nikki Sasky, wherever you are, I hope you are all doing well, and thank you for watching.